Welcome to Rethink My Health Radio Show. Each week we come to you from our studios in Atlanta, Georgia, talking about healthcare matters that matter most to you, your family, your loved ones, and as I say time and time again, they do matter to us, the scientists, the researchers, the practitioners in the trenches, day in, day out, talking about root cause medicine. And as I said before, integrative medicine is just good medicine. We started our show back here in Atlanta talking about chronic diseases, talking about the devastation of certain diseases. We've educated you what integrative medicine is. It's just a partnership. It's between you and your practitioner and thinking outside the box. As a matter of fact, there is no box in integrative medicine. We want to be innovative and we want to be creative. And today's show is an exciting show because it's a show about inspiration. It's a show about hope. Because cancer, yes, the big C word, that's a scary word. Millions of Americans deal with it, whether it's a family member, whether it's a loved one, or whether it's you. If you're newly diagnosed or know somebody, stay tuned because we have a special guest who beat the odds, given a 1% chance to live. And he beat it. So Dr. Pete Sulack is my guest. He is the founder of Rethink Health and Matthew 10. And Dr. Pete and I met a while back through some mutual associates. Jordan Rubin was one of them, and Dr. Josh Axe. Dr. Pete, welcome to the show of Rethink My Health. We really appreciate your time, taking the time out of your busy schedule. Welcome, sir.
Hey, absolutely. It's an honor to join you guys, and excited for today.
I appreciate it, Dr. Pete. So let's just get right into it, because I talked about introducing you. I know that you are a practitioner. You've been practicing as a chiropractic physician and also focusing on nutrition for many, many, many years. You've been an evangelist all over the world. What was it like, Dr. Pete, when you got that devastating news that you were diagnosed with a grade 4 astrocytoma? Take us back a little bit, just to give our listeners just a perspective of what you were dealing with.
Absolutely. You know, it was obviously a very surreal experience. I remember it was actually a year ago today, so November 25th, 2024. And my brother convinced me to go to the emergency room. I thought it maybe had a mini stroke. So that morning we shared with our staff for the first time that, hey, something's going on, not sure quite what it is, but you're going to have to take a step forward. I'm going to take a step back. And went to the emergency room because it was the week of Thanksgiving. And after 8 hours in the emergency room, the doctor came in, neurosurgeon came in and says, Dr. Pete, you have what they thought at the time was a glioblastoma. MD Anderson, where we got a second opinion, actually said I had a 1% chance to still be alive in 8 months. And that was exactly 1 year ago today. I feel better than I've ever felt my whole life. And it's just amazing, just the privilege to walk this out. I actually feel like this is the greatest gift I've ever been given, other than my salvation and my family. It set the precipice for my life going forward, and allowed me to kind of take a deep dive into where true health comes from. And here we are today.
Well, that sounds very inspiring. So let's talk about this deep dive. And, you know, I got joined with me in the studio, Dr. Burdett. And Dr. Burdett, with all your experience, with cancer and doing a residency at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, with your medical education, what were the chances for Dr. Pete surviving with a grade 4 astrocytoma? From what you've seen over the years in the research, what were his chances?
Well, the statistics certainly say it's a very aggressive cancer, and I would echo what he said. The chances would be very low in terms of what we see with normal standard of care.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that one. So, Dr. P, let's get a little bit into some of the choices you have to make. And once again, this is Dr. Pete's story at Rethink My Health. And certainly, if you're dealing with cancer, we always encourage you to seek out assistance with a professional that focuses on this. But our goal today is to educate you that there is hope. Everybody's story is different. But Dr. Pete took action. Dr. Pete, tell us a little bit about what you did initially and some of the choices you made, and let's navigate through that where you are today.
Absolutely. So I think that first night, that Monday evening, after talking to my family and sharing the news with my family, I reached out to Dr. Josh Axe, and it was convenient because his wife, Chelsea, and my wife, Steph, are first cousins. And then Jordan Rubin, who's, we've written books together. He's been around the world with me, one of my best friends. And we kind of created a game plan around 5 key pillars of diet, supplementation, detoxification, oxygenation, and faith, knowing that faith was going to be basically the capstone that held it all together, and just making sure that I never lost perspective. And so we approached it that way. Because of that, they encouraged me to become my own patient in a program that I created for my wife 5 years ago. They also encouraged me to get in contact with you, Dr. Gez, and I headed to Progressive Medical in Atlanta. And really, I kind of approached it. And then I also went to Immunity Cancer Center in Cancun, and that was after a surgery I had on December 11th, where they removed a tennis ball-sized tumor. And I took that tumor sample, sent it to Cancun, and they mixed it with my plasma. So that's really the approach I took, is based on 5 pillars. The Word of God says that the hand of the diligent rules and is made to prosper. And part of diligence is wise counsel in a divine working effort. And I really feel like, having that strategy, laying that foundation in advance was super beneficial for me and my family.
Well, I like the word you use, strategy, because obviously sometimes when we become sick and first of all, when you have cancer, a lot of patients think, oh my gosh, how did this happen to me? Why did this happen? And there's also kind of like a disbelief. And then some individuals, take a step back and they go to a professional. You took wise counsel. You seek counsel by several individuals, and then you had to take a step back because you're a practitioner. So how difficult was it for you, being a doctor, getting this devastating diagnosis?
It's interesting because probably 10 years earlier, I felt the Lord speak to me in my spirit, one day, and the Lord just said, son, you need to humble yourself and become teachable. And in my words, not the Lord's words, he really said, you need to embrace what you suck at, so I can surround you with people that are strong where you are weak. And I think in that moment, being diagnosed, given such a poor prognosis from the doctor, I think that was, God gave me supernatural grace. But it was really because, one, I was broken and needed to understand and embrace what I didn't have knowledge of. This was very overwhelming to me. And so to be able to surround myself with people that are strong where I was weak, like Dr. Josh Axe, like Jordan Rubin, like you, Dr. Gez, was super beneficial and allowed us to just embrace, one puts 1,000 flight, 2 10,000 a flight. And I felt like if I was going to beat this thing, then we had to go all in with wise counsel and a divine working strategy.
That's great advice. So for our listeners out there, if you have a family member or someone else have a devastating disease, not only cancer, other things, seek wise counsel. We always encourage listeners out there to take an integrative approach. Obviously, everybody has a different journey, but it's important to seek wise counsel. Thank you for that, Dr. Pete. Hey, Dr. Burdett, let's talk briefly some of the root causes, and I'm going to circle back around to Dr. Pete. In your research, what are some of the root causes of any brain tumor, not just a grade 4 astrocytoma, glioblastoma?
Well, of course, some can be genetic, but I would like to remind our listeners that the World Cancer Research Foundation says 95% of cancers are environmental. So even in something like a breast cancer where you might have a BRCA1 and 2 gene, that risk factor gene, it doesn't mean 100% chance. In fact, it's only about a 13 or 15 to 20% increase over somebody else that doesn't have that genetic predisposition. So just really reminding our listeners that so much is environmental and there is possibility to shift that. So in terms of risk factors for brain cancers, first of all, they are much more rare, but the first thing I would think about is absolutely diet. This is one of the areas where we have very good research in terms of some more extreme kind of dietary interventions. Something called a ketogenic diet has has been shown to be, well, as effective as standard of care in the published literature. So when people say diet doesn't matter, that objectively is not true. That is not what the data says. Now, for sure, when people are having moments where they're not feeling well, they're not getting calories in, of course, we make exceptions and make sure people are eating. But to say there is no data around diet and cancer is just objectively not true. The second thing is we have to think about how best to establish immune health. And so, like in this case, some really interesting therapies were utilized, some immunotherapies where part of the tumor was taken and then they used that to train the immune system. And these are things that are out there and available. They just aren't as routinely talked about. So really, this isn't per se a therapy, but asking questions, advocating for yourself, looking for different additional therapies, adjuncts to what is being done. All of that becomes so important. Again, we just had a previous episode where we talked about toxicity. So absolutely, and this is again something in the brain, something not exactly a neurologic condition, but certainly in the brain. And so making sure we have the right antioxidants and that we're detoxing appropriately makes sense. And then there are going to be certain natural adjuncts that have better research. But for example, in terms of the diet piece, sugar is not great for us ever, but especially in this case. For example, if you're diabetic, you have an increased risk of cancer. When you control your blood sugar as a diabetic, your risk of cancer goes back almost to normal. So we know that relationship is there. You've got to think a lot about the spiritual, as we talked about, and then diet and exercise and lifestyle are all way up there.
Well said, Dr. Burdett. And when you change your diet, you change your life. Hey, Dr. Pete, getting to the 5 pillars again, I love how you put this together. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you put together with Redeem Health. And you've got a whole program for those listeners out there that are interested. And we'll talk about how to get in contact with you. But you mentioned this word detoxification. One of our previous segments, we talked about heavy metals. And heavy metals are deleterious. And I know that we tested you for a lot. And that's something that showed up. So talk to us a little bit about the detox program you did and how did that impact you on setting you up for the healing that you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Detoxification is so crucial. And we have 5 main detoxifying organs, our intestines, our kidneys, our liver, our lungs, our skin. But I think what most people didn't realize, and I didn't realize either, that when the body is nutrient deficient at a cellular level, because really when it comes to cancer, it's metabolic. It's based on your metabolism and your energy production. It's based on mitochondrial dysfunction. And when the body at a cellular level is deficient, it really impairs detoxification. So not only will it impair the 5 detoxifying organs in the body, but it'll also impair the body's ability to detoxify heavy metals, lime, mold, parasites, and so forth. And so that was crucial for us in making sure that we could have the sufficiency that our body needed so it could do what God called it to do. Because I'm all about a heavy metal detox. I'm all about parasites. I'm all about, detoxifying from mold and so forth. But if the body is nutrient deficient, it will actually spin on itself. And so for me, it was those 5 pillars all coming together strategically, and you helped me kind of assess that and discern that in my own approach. Absolutely.
I'm a big believer in detoxification, and living in such a toxic world where billions and billion pounds of chemicals we're being assaulted on a daily basis. The human body's a sponge. We got to get rid of that. So that's one of the pillars, oxygen. Okay. I believe you and I had a conversation. We talked about Otto Warburg and some of the oxygen therapies. How did that assist you, and what were they?
Absolutely. So, when you look at cancer in general, it really needs a fuel source. And as Dr. Burdett mentioned, sugar is the primary fuel source, glucose. But it also needs inflammation, and it needs a lack of oxygen. And so that's why I tell people all the time that, hey, you can have the cleanest diet ever and remove all sugar, but if you're incorporating healthy foods that you have a sensitivity to, it creates a breeding ground of inflammation, and then a lack of oxygen. And so when you look at the work of Dr. Otto Warburg, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, National Winters, and a lot of these pioneers, in the cancer space and holistic cancer space, they talk about that cancer becomes very vulnerable in an oxygen-rich environment. And so for me, those were things like ozone saunas, things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, things like high-dose vitamin C and that pro-oxidant capacity that's kind of affected by that. And I think it's just everything you can do to oxygenate the cells, hydrogen, water, breathing in oxygen and hydrogen. And so a lot of cool things out there right now, a lot of cool modalities that will actually boost oxygen uptake by the cells and really create a vulnerability for cancer cells, at the same time protecting healthy cells.
Absolutely, Dr. Pete. I totally agree with you on that one. That's why at Progressive Medical, we have all these different modalities, all these different therapies. And it sounds like a lot, Dr. Pete, and we know it's difficult and challenging. Any words of wisdom for those listeners out there that could be battling a cancer? It may not be a brain tumor like yours. What are the words of wisdom? Because sometimes patients get treatment fatigue. And, you know, unfortunately, and I'm not here to disrespect anybody by saying this, but a lot of times you hear all these publications and advertising, we're looking for the cure, we're looking for the cure. And, you know, unfortunately, right, cancer is a multifactorial disease. There's so many processes going on. There's not that one medication that's a game changer, right? So what's your word of advice for those patients that are battling? And this sounds like a lot. It sounds like a very difficult regimen.
Yeah, you know, I do feel like when I began to study those people that had beat cancer, they went all in. And let me tell you this, it wasn't necessarily the variable of doing chemo radiation or not. I don't actually think that was a variable at all. In fact, my wife has two aunts, and both of them were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, one given a 6-month life expectancy, one given less than that. And they did standard of care, but they went all in on their lifestyle modification and diet, and now one's cancer-free for 5 years and one's cancer-free for 7 years. Yet, one of my best friends in the world, a month before I was diagnosed with grade 1 leukemia. And the doctor said, hey, it's no big deal. Like, we're gonna beat this thing. But while he was set up to chemo, they just wanted him to get calories. And so his diet consisted of pizza, milkshakes, Diet Cokes, pudding cups, and cookies. That's what they fed him in the hospital while he was being set up to chemo. And unfortunately, my best friend is dead because lifestyle modification does matter. Like Dr. Burdett says, food is medicine. And so the fact that a doctor will tell you, hey, food doesn't matter, in the same time, they'll give you a PET scan that will blow you up with radiographic glucose and light the cancer up like a Christmas tree. Diet does matter. And I know that, but we have to look at context. We have to look at the context of why a doctor will tell you food doesn't matter or diet doesn't matter. Because as long as you're kept within standard of care, they're covered. As long as they play ignorant, they're covered. And the moment a doctor fails to play ignorant and starts to hint at lifestyle modification, they can actually be in trouble by leading you out of standard of care. My thing is, I'm not against standard of care. My thing is, you have to establish the terrain of the body. My objective was not to treat cancer. It wasn't to replace an oncologist or medical team. In fact, we had those. The objective was to establish the terrain of the body in such a way that cancer was no longer hospitable in the body, to reverse engineer. Cancer had the opportunity to grow in my brain to a size of a tennis ball. And so my objective was, how do I reverse engineer the terrain to make sure that cancer can never grow again in my body? And that's really what I tried to do and establish. And now a year later, by the grace of God, I'm cancer-free. The doctor says I have a normal brain. My latest MRI and CT scan both confirmed there was no sign of cancer. My blood work came back perfect. I'm just so, so grateful. But you have to go all in. You have to establish the terrain. Regardless of the approach that you take, you have to establish the terrain of the body, open up detoxification pathways, add the sufficiency that the body needs, and oxygenate those cells. People ask me all the time, Dr. Pete, do you do all those things that you mentioned in your protocol? Every single day, I make sure my diet is personalized, that my supplements are personalized to me, that detox pathways are open, that I'm oxygenating my cells, and I'm living by faith.
Well, Dr. Pete, I got to tell you something. That's inspiring, and I totally agree with what you're saying, that you have to be all in. Yeah, this is time-consuming. Yes, It's challenging, but guess what? So's cancer. Cancer's not going to walk away. And as you mentioned, there's been some great advancements on traditional oncology. We had some immunotherapies out there, which I think is great. But the standard of care hasn't really changed that much over the past several decades. We've declared war on cancer in the early 70s. 1 in 7 Americans were getting cancer back then. Today, it's 1 in 3 in women and 1 in 2 in men. So we need to wake up. It is a lifestyle. It's multifactorial. Diet does make a difference, and it has a lot to do with inflammation. So, Dr. Pete, we got a few minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about your program. And I love the term that you talk about, be resilient, right?
Yeah.
How does that play a role, and whether you're fighting cancer traditionally, you're doing it integratively, doing holistically? You use that term, be resilient. What does that exactly mean for you? And now you started a brand new program encouraging others. Tell our listeners about that program and how they can get involved in that.
Absolutely. So Be Resilient is a program actually I had created for my wife 5 years previous to my diagnosis. And my wife came to me, and my wife at the time had the cleanest diet of anyone I knew. She was gluten-free, dairy-free, eating organic, working out, taking supplements, mid-40s, but she was exhausted, digestive issues and hormonal imbalances. And so at the time, I reached out to a number of functional medicine practitioners and found that most of them didn't do functional blood work. And the ones that did gave everyone supplements, which were great supplements, but there was no meal plan, there's no personalization. And my wife just said, hey, no offense, but I'm tired of living this way. Like, I need to figure this thing out. And that's when I decided to really start to do due diligence in metabolic health and functional labs and what the body was doing at a cellular level, and kind of determined that, hey, we're going to run these tests on her, like a food sensitivity test, a DNA test, a nutrient deficiency test. And I ran the blood work and then called my manufacturer and said, hey, can you do me a huge favor? Can you take my wife's blood work, put it down your assembly line, and fill it with what she's deficient in? And they laughed at me. They said, Dr. B, that doesn't work. There's no money in compounded supplements, and no one in America will accommodate. And unfortunately, I found that to be true. And thankfully, I found a manufacturer in Canada that was willing to take my wife's blood work and not only fill it with what she's deficient in, couple it with her DNA mutations, her food sensitivities. We were able to measure antioxidants, 50 antioxidants against her physiology, and see which ones would be most protective for her. And we compounded a tailor-made supplement, created a meal plan for her based on her blood work, and set her up with a nutritionist, and it honestly changed her life. And I started allowing my patients that were coming to me from around the world with cancer and MS and Parkinson's to utilize this program. And it started getting calls from oncologists saying, hey, we sent a patient to you 4 months ago that 7 years ago had breast cancer. They did the conventional treatment, and now it's come back with a vengeance, and they've refused standard of care. And so we sent her to you, and after 4 months, convinced her to rerun her blood work and found that all the tumors had shrunk in half and were hollow. She's cancer-free. And I started hearing that over and over again. So thankfully, when I was diagnosed, you know, they encouraged me, become your own patient. And I incorporated this program. I ran blood work on myself because I knew this. I couldn't afford to guess. When it came to the things I was putting in my body, my diet and supplements, I had to make sure that that the variables of my DNA and nutrient deficiencies and food sensitivities, that all of those were at play. And I created a compounded supplement for me. And now that program's become Be Resilient. We've adapted it with integrative nutritionists trained in oncology, just to provide the support that a person needs as they walk through this journey. It's an 8-month program. It's completely personalized. It's not there to replace oncologists or replace your medical team or it's simply there to be an adjunct support, an integrative approach to make sure that the train of the body is established, that the detox pathways are open, that the cells have restored their fluidity, their cell membrane.
Hey, Dr. Pete, I hate to interrupt you, Dr. Pete. We got a break in 20 seconds. Hey, this is Rethink My Health, interviewing Dr. Pete Sulack. He beat the odds, 1% survival, and he did an amazing. His program is Be Resilient. We'll be back in a moment talking more with Dr. Pete. This is Rethink My Health, sponsored by Progressive Medical Center. Be back in a moment. Dr. Gez Agolli, joining you every week, and what a insightful show. What a powerful show, and very, very inspirational. We have one of our good friends, Dr. Pete Sulack, talking about his journey. And if you or a loved one is diagnosed with cancer, don't lose hope. Trust in the Lord and seek wise counsel is what our good friend Dr. Pete's talking about. And before the break, he was talking a little bit about his program, Redeem Health, and talking about individualizing protocol. And one of the key phrases, his 5 pillars, one of them was about detoxification, right? And one of them was also talking about oxygenation, but the other one is really focusing on your individualized nutrition. The human body has 30 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells. And when the body has toxicity, these cells don't communicate. They don't have the proper nutrition. And when you change your diet, you change your life. There's a lot of confusion out there. Should I go keto? Should I go vegan? And you know, we know that one size does not fit all. But when you test, you're not guessing. You can find out what's causing inflammation. Chronic inflammation definitely contributes to a low immune function. A low immune function opens you up and having these neoplasia cells, these are cancer cells, and it's called mitosis, and it just grows out of control. Dr. Pete, I know you got to run in a few minutes, and first of all, we really thank you. Dr. Bennett and I really thank you for sharing your story. Any last words of wisdom? I know we have a few minutes, and you know, you beat the odds, Dr. Pete, okay? What do you contribute the most important thing besides your faith? I know that you're a strong believer, and we definitely know that God's in control, but he used you in a mighty way. What would you contribute is the most important thing in your journey?
You know, obviously, I think it's faith. I think it's never losing perspective, knowing that God is for us and not against us. He's an ever-present help in the time of need. And so for all of those listening with loved ones, or maybe you yourself are going through a cancer journey or just a chronic illness, and you just not felt like yourself for a long, long time, and just know that God is for you and not against you. He just hardens us to the difficulties that's strong, holds us up with his victorious right hand, and he's just so, so gracious. And I think, you know, it's a strategic approach. That's one of the number one reasons I went to Progressive Medical, is to make sure I could open up detoxification pathways, oxygenate my cells the way I needed to, make sure I could personalize everything. We ran a number of labs there. And people ask me all the time, Dr. Pete, what's the best diet for brain cancer, breast cancer, so forth? And while I lean towards keto with brain cancer, I know there's an anti-inflammatory, which is very advisable for breast cancer, and a high-fiber diet with colon cancer. To me, what the trump card is a personalized diet. When you can personalize everything, when you're not guessing, when you're testing everything and being very strategic, for me, that is the key. That's the key for no matter how you're approaching your treatment, make sure you go all in when it comes to diet and lifestyle modification.
Absolutely great advice. Going all in is really the key. That's how you become resilient, creating a team with wisdom, seeking wise counsel. That's what Dr. Pete did, and he took action, faced with a 1% chance of living. Now, 1 year to the day of him being diagnosed, not only is he cancer-free, he feels better than ever before. He's resilient. And now he's been given the opportunity to teach and to inspire and to make an impact on your cancer journey. Dr. Pete, how can our listeners get in touch with you and learn more about your Redeem Health program, which we do sponsor? Progressive Medical sponsors it. We're a big believer in it. We know that there's a role, and we work together as a team. How do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So I think the easiest way is just to follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Dr. Pete Sulack, DrPetesulack. And if you type protocol in any one of the comments on any one of the videos, you can follow your messages and download my 87-page free resilience protocol with all the books that inspired me, the scriptures that I stood on, the promises I stood on, the supplements, the modalities I use. It's just everything that I've done in my journey. It's a free guide to simply empower you in your own walk.
It's a powerful guide. And, you know, Dr. Pete, when you came to us, you did everything. You did all the IVs. We did the PEMF. We did the Nano-V. We did the ozone. All of these things are fantastic. And, you know, I encourage all listeners out there, Dr. Pete took action. Yeah, this is definitely something that takes an investment of time and financial resources, but it's worth it. because the end result is that your body is a temple. Your health is important. Dr. Pete, thank you so much for joining us. And I know, any other last words of advice based on everything you're doing?
It's just such an honor to be with you. I'm so grateful as I look back at this last year. You have been so influential in my life. You have walked with me. You have been strong where I've been weak. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pete. You're inspiring so many. God bless you on your journey. And we will see you next time. Dr. Pete, it was great having Dr. Pete on here. And it's so inspiring when you hear a patient that himself is a practitioner. And, sometimes practitioners, not all of them, of course, but some practitioners believe that I'm, not going to get sick and it's not going to happen to me. And sometimes we don't pay attention to our own health. I know
Absolutely.
that sounds like being a hypocrite. I know that, but it's true.
It's true. Yeah. So all of us need to take a step back, think about how we're monitoring what's going on in our body. Have we done our lab work in the past year? Have we looked at any of these things like metals or how well we're detoxing or gut health or nutrient levels? And if we haven't, and if you're working with someone who hasn't even had a conversation with you about what you're eating, well, it's time to take stock of that and evaluate and think about what best next steps should be.
You would think that practitioners, and listen, I'm not criticizing any doctor or nurse practitioner or naturopathic doctor or health coach out there that works with patients every day. We know it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of focus, and you have to really help patients that are fighting for their life. But at the end of the day, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not an example yourself, if you're not doing certain things, how could you expect other patients to do it? So if you're listening to me and you happen to be a practitioner, take action. Don't treat yourself. Find a colleague that you trust or a team that you trust. It's okay to look at your labs, of course, because we know how to study them. But I inspire you to take action. Dr. Burnett, some of the best integrative doctors and practitioners that I personally met in the last 30 years are the ones that got sick themselves.
Absolutely.
Or a family member got sick.
Absolutely.
And they saw firsthand that they can make an impact by taking action, by doing these 5 pillars, which really involves everything we've talked about: oxygenation, detoxification, faith, individualized supplements, individualized diet, bringing down chronic inflammation, right? They're some of the best doctors out there because they've experienced it firsthand. If you're going to a practitioner, ask that practitioner, have they done the treatments that they're recommending?
Absolutely.
Ask them. I will do everything. I've done everything at Progressive Medical. Why? Because I want to make sure that, number one, it's easy to do. Number two, there is scientific research. Number three, does it work for me? And certainly you have to be able to communicate and be able to have empathy, right? Right? Not sympathy, empathy, right? You want empathy for your patients. You want to be able to get in the trenches with them and say, I know it's tough. I know the diet's tough. I know it's difficult to be here for 4 or 5 hours when you have cancer doing these IVs and doing the oxygenation. Cancer's tough. There's no doubt about it. There's no panacea. There's nothing out there that's the magic bullet. We have to look at everything. And you heard Dr. Pete. He did everything.
Absolutely.
And he's alive today. And I looked at the report. He went to MD Anderson, which is a great institution. They offered him some great surgical options. He took advantage of one of them. He went to Duke for a second opinion. And the neurosurgeon was very honest, and he said that the standard of care is just chemo, and you got a 1% chance to live. That surgeon even encouraged, I really respect him. He read Dr. Pete's book, and he said, seek other alternatives. That's what he said.
Absolutely.
So I really respect these surgeons out there. These surgeons do a great job.
Yes.
We should applaud all these surgeons out there. They do a phenomenal job, right? But they know that it's limited. The body is an amazing, amazing machine. Call it a machine. How the body works when it gets back in homeostasis, the body can heal itself, and we know that. Yes, use traditional medicine when we need it. Dr. Pete debulked the tumor. He did dendritic cells. He detoxified. He oxidated. He had individualized supplements, and look at him now 1 year later. And, God bless Dr. Pete, and we're so happy for him as well. So, Dr. Pete, since we're talking about brain tumors, we're seeing more and more brain tumors, okay? Besides the ketogenic diet, what other therapies have you seen in your research that are making an impact for brain tumors?
Yeah, so you want to think about what can we deliver to the brain itself, and there's something called the blood-brain barrier that makes that a bit tricky. So when we're choosing therapies at Progressive for different areas of the body, you even got to think about how that gets delivered. So, for example, some of the things that we'll use, poly-MVA is a therapy that gets delivered to the brain. Also, alpha-lipoic acid IVs get delivered to the brain. They cross the blood-brain barrier. We can even take what are called curcuminoids from turmeric, and those can be prepared in an IV, and that too very effectively crosses the blood-brain barrier. So we want to think about therapies that will get delivered into that area. As Dr. Pete said, diet has been really well substantiated with brain cancer. So the more we can get people off the sugar, get them on metabolic support, get them on a ketogenic diet, the better they're going to do. Also, another big thing that we will utilize at Progressive are those oxygen therapies that you keep mentioning. We'll use hyperbaric oxygen chambers. And this is a way to perfuse the tissue with oxygen. Like Dr. Pete said, cancer does not thrive in a well-oxygenated environment. And it turns out on planet Earth, the amount of oxygen that's in the air day to day is different than it was 10 years, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. So we're all getting less oxygen as well. So using these oxygen chambers to perfuse the tissue with oxygen creates an environment that really turns off cell division and slows the process down. And as you slow that down, even adjunct care can work better. So really surrounding the person. I mean, even standard chemotherapy, there are studies that show that it works better when you're not consuming a high sugar diet because cancer loves that sugar. So you starve it of the sugar and it will now even uptake regular chemotherapy better. So really realizing that it's a whole person approach.
Absolutely whole person. And also fasting, a lot of research on fasting. Dr. Volto Longo, USC PhD researcher, talks about that as well. And great research, because what happens with cancer, there's so many moving parts. And the body has something called a normal mechanism, apoptosis, which is natural cell death. And sometimes there's a mechanism in the body that does not allow that. By putting the body in starvation mode, you get into something called autophagy, and that will assist, okay? It sounds counterintuitive, especially if patients cachexit, so it's kind of a balancing act. Cachexit is a fancy medical word for muscle wasting, very frail, so you would not think that you should be fasting. So definitely seek counsel with wise practitioners that have experience in it, but ultimately, if you're not cachexit, you could definitely implore some fasting strategies. Fasting is also biblical, but from a health perspective, even if you start off with 16 to 18 to 20 hours intermittent fasting, you can have, I don't really like dry fasting for cancer. I do believe that you should stay hydrated. Drinking pure water, like Dr. Pete talked about, hydrogen water. Hydrogen is a gas. And approximately 10% of the human body is made from hydrogen. And without hydrogen, your mitochondria suffers. We're seeing a lot of mitochondria issues. And believe it or not, cancer can hijack the mitochondria.
Absolutely.
Cancer does not thrive in oxygen-rich areas. Cancer can thrive on excess glutamine pathways. Cancer can thrive on excess glucose, right? So it's not only glucose is the bad guy, it's too much glucose. Too much glucose outside the cell. You need certain amounts of glucose to make energy, but when you have too much, that's when these cancer cells. Also, now we're finding out that cancer can hijack fatty acids. Now, we got multiple pathways for these cancer. Now, chemo and radiation, what they do is they destroy the cancer, but that's only one pathway. So we're big believer. You heard Dr. Pete. We're not against traditional therapies, of course, but he's talking about lifestyle medicine, nutrition, and using these tools and to take action. And that's why I'm a big believer on getting involved with the whole team, because you can sit there and say, oh, I'm going to change my diet, I'm going to do this. It's easy to fail. You need accountability. You need coaching. You need support. you need to look at a report on why you need this type of individualized treatment. And when you have that support, you become resilient and your body gets into this healing mode. It takes 90 days to make a habit that sticks. I know it sounds like a long time, right? But that 90 days can change your life. And if you're faced with a devastating diagnosis and that physician tells you that you have a very low chance of survival, you can either give up or you can take action. That's up to you. It's your body. It's your temple. Hopefully you take action. But if you don't, it's your choice, right? It's your free will. God gave us free will. We believe at Progressive Medical that you can make an impact with lifestyle medicine. It's all about lifestyle medicine. It's all about root cause. It's all about finding strategies. Not all strategies work on each individual's. Each cancer is different. Each journey is different. Each diet could be different. But you heard Dr. Pete, very inspirational story. And I remember when Dr. Pete contacted me with Dr. Axe and also Jordan Rubin. We talked about a strategy session. And the strategy really with Dr. Pete was get all the testing done.
Yes.
He had the surgery first, get all the testing done, and then get onto this treatment. He saw Dr. Bouquet. He saw 2 or 3 other practitioners. He saw our dietitian. He saw our coach. He saw one of our naturopaths. And he was committed. He did the IVs. He did the ozone sauna. He did the hyperbaric. And he never once complained. He never once complained about his diagnosis. He took action. And I know, listen, I'm not trying to tell you that you should not feel sad or angry. And these are all emotions, right? Or disbelief. But when you have joy, regardless of the circumstances, it's very difficult, of course, right? Because it's a lot of work to go through these type of treatments. And I know that there's an expense there. And I listen, we're very sensitive to all the above. But you do with what you can with what you have. Do something and take action. There is hope, Dr. Burnett. And I'm really excited to see some of the advancements. And we're seeing some amazing results as well.
Absolutely. And I think that this is the beauty of integrative medicine, is that we're not just focused on killing the cancer, but we're also focused on building the person. And that's a missed piece. Just because you get a diagnosis of cancer doesn't mean all you are is a cancer. You are still you. You are still a human being. And so focusing on all that other piece, building the immune system, building your systems, finding weak areas, doing things to improve energy and outcomes, all of this tilts the odds in your favor when we're able to think about you as a whole person and not just reduce you to a clump of cells.
No, we're not a clump of cells. Absolutely not. Okay, so since we're talking about this subject right now, I want to stay on the cancer subject, of course, and I want to talk about some of the testing that we did with Dr. Pete. He gave permission to talk about that. So we did the segment previously on heavy metals. And with Dr. Pete, we knew that he had some heavy metals, put him through a detox plan. But we also found that he had a lot of oxidative stress. So how does oxidative stress play a role with brain tumors in particular?
Yeah, so oxidative stress is a fancy way of saying too many free radicals. And that's really important in the brain because the brain is about 2% of the weight of the body, yet it uses 20% of oxygen. And so oxygen, we need it, we have to have it, but as it gets used up, it can create leftovers. They're called reactive oxygen species. And so the brain is very fragile in the face of free radicals or oxidative stress. A second thing that makes the brain more fragile is that it doesn't have a lot of defense systems. So if I look at your liver, it has a lot of little systems in it to make antioxidants locally. They're called antioxidant response elements. They have names like glutathione peroxidase and superoxide dismutase. But the brain has very few of these, especially like compared to other tissue like the liver. So it uses a lot of oxygen that creates a lot of free radicals, yet it's a small percent of our body, and it has very minimal defense systems in terms of antioxidant support. So all of that to say, antioxidants are really important to our brain. One of my favorite antioxidants is something called sulforaphane. It comes from broccoli. This too crosses the blood-brain barrier very easily and has some good data in terms of brain cancers as well. But again, we've got to look for things that improve the health of that tissue. And what we know is the brain does not do a very good job of protecting itself, yet has a whole lot of nutritional needs